Good afternoon, everyone. So now we are going to resume our discussions on the convention on work stream 1, the framework convention on on tax corporation. We end at the point of this, we've closed the last session by completing our discussions on the effective tax prevention and resolution for tax disputes. And I think now we should start our discussion on the second commitment, which is sustainable development. But before we start and open the floor for discussions on sustainable development, I would like to ask if still anyone needs to highlight or have any comment or intervention on the first commitment, which is effective tax prevention and resolution for disputes. Okay, looks like no more interventions in this topic. So now we're gonna start our discussions for the commitment number 2, which is the sustainable development. The floor is opened. So as I see no one requesting the floor, so after the lunch break, of course, and I think it's expected. So maybe we'll do sort of refreshment. So Daniel will go again through the slides related to the sustainable development to remind everyone with what we were talking about. Hopefully, we. So we have requested from Nigeria, so we'll ask Nigeria just wait till Matthew just remind everyone of what we have in the sustainable development. Then we will start with the Nigeria intervention. Daniel, the floor is yours.
Yeah, okay. All right. Thank you, Chair. So on the commitment on sustainable development, what we, the discussions generally were on that, what was in the commitment, what was the wording used in the commitment was basically adequate. So the work stream decided to come out with some proposed wording that could be not in generally a text, but what the text could look like, and reproduced what was in subparagraph C of paragraph 10 of the tier with just a little amendment. So the language will be that would look like taking into account the different capacities of the states. Okay. So looking at the various capacities of the states, I've lost my. I seem to not. Kitty, I've lost it. There's no sound. It keeps disappearing on the screen. Let me pick my laptop. Okay, right. Thank you. Okay. All right. So what we decided to look at in terms of proposed text will be that taking into account the different capacities of the various states, the state parties agreed to pursue international tax cooperation approaches that will contribute to the achievement of sustainable development in its three dimensions: economic, social, environmental, in a balanced and integrated manner. Now, the idea was that when we look in the UN circles, there's already quite a lot of discussions on this, or what is understood by this in the UN circles. So that's why we came out with this. So what we're asking the committee to look at is, are there any other approaches to sustainable development that we may have left out of what we have here, of this text that is here? And in that sense, are there additional paragraphs that we need? Or what we have here, basically picked from the TUR, is enough and is broad enough that allows us that in the future, if we need to come out with any protocols, it will be sufficient for the matter. So that's what we have. Sure.
Thank you, Daniel. Distinguished Delegate of Nigeria.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thanks, Daniel, for leading us through this. I speak on behalf of the African Group, and as to the specific issues of commitment as regards sustainable development, the African Group says that the whole discussion about the Framework Convention is not abstract, and it is meant for a purposive goal, which is to ensure that we are able to implement the Sustainable Development Goals of the UN in all countries, including African countries, and therefore the issue of domestic revenue mobilization is key to the achievement of that goal. And so whatever convention and framework we are coming up with must be able to lead to the achievement of that goal. Now, coming back to a specific question as to what we currently have in the relevant paragraphs, whether it is broad and sufficient enough, we are of the view that the language that is proposed is appropriate and also captures the whole intention of ensuring that states are able to generate revenue on their own and be able to also ensure that we have sustainable development in all developing countries as well as also in developing economies. However, we seek that if there are any aspects that are left out, we are open to discussing those aspects, but we believe that the current language is good and is able to capture the essence of the, sustainable development. Thank you.
Thank you. Distinguished Delegate of Brazil.
Thank you, Chair. First of all, we congratulate the Chair, the Secretariat, and the co-lead for the preparation of the issues note, which will provide guidance to the negotiating committee along with the terms of reference. We welcome the opportunity to contribute to the discussion on how sustainable development should guide the design and implementation of the UN Framework Convention on International Tax Cooperation. To be meaningful, the convention must embed sustainable development as a foundational commitment, not only as a goal, but as a driver of the rules we establish. This means incorporating normative and operational elements that align tax cooperation with our shared commitment to the 2030 agenda. First, this includes ensuring the equitable allocation of taxing rights so that all countries, especially developing ones, have the ability to tax cross-border activities that occur with or target their economies. This principle promotes both fairness and domestic resource mobilization essential for development. Second, international tax cooperation must reinforce the role of progressive taxation and structural reform aiming for more balanced economic development. Taxation is a vital tool for addressing inequality, enabling inclusive growth, and funding social protection system core to SDGs 1 and 10. Third, the convention should help countries to enhance their fiscal space, allowing countries the policy autonomy to shape tax systems that support domestic resource mobilization and their own development pathways, while responding to social and environment imperatives, including climate actions under SDG 13. Finally, the Framework Convention must also help members to ensure the financing of public goods, public education, healthcare, climate resilience, infrastructure, and so on, areas that require collective effort in both regional and international levels. In sum, sustainable development should not be a secondary consideration. It must shape the very architecture of international tax cooperation under this convention. So, thank you.
Thank you. Distinguished Delegate of India.
Thank you, Chair. And as most of the distinguished delegates before us have said, we are generally happy with this language that has been presented. We also would like to point out that the concept of sustainable development has been mentioned several times in the terms of reference. The objectives at 7C clearly mention that one of the objectives would be to establish an inclusive, fair, transparent, efficient, equitable, and effective international system for sustainable development. And it goes on to speak of that this will eventually address challenges of strengthening domestic resource mobilization. And thereafter, it also finds its place in the principles and then the commitments. So I think put together all the elements of the terms of reference, which will then be reflected in the Framework Convention, I think it takes into account all the various issues or factors that would be relevant for the issue of sustainable development. So I think the language that is now presented in paragraph 17 of the issues note is something that we can accept. Thank you.
Thank you. Distinguished Delegate of Canada.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. La position du Canada, on était plus ou moins confortable avec la formulation qui se trouvait dans les termes de référence. Nous notons que essentiellement, qui est la formulation qui a été reprise dans le issue note. Nous notons par contre qu'il y a eu un ajout qui a été fait au préambule de cette formulation qui fait référence au besoin de tenir compte des différentes capacités des États membres. Nous interrogeons sur l'interprétation qu'il faut donner à cet ajout dans ce contexte précis et nous aimerions, si c'est possible, si vous pourriez expliquer un peu la raison qui a mené à ce changement dans la formulation qui est proposée dans le issue note. Nous apprécierions la clarification. Merci.
distinguished delegate of Colombia.
Thank you, Chair. Primero quisiéramos agradecer a los colíderes por su trabajo en el workstream y en la elaboración de los documentos de trabajo en relación con la Convención Marco. De forma consistente con la posición expuesta por Brasil, Colombia reconoce la necesidad de fortalecer el sistema tributario internacional para mejorar la movilización de recursos domésticos en los países en línea con el objetivo de contribuir al desarrollo sostenible en sus dimensiones económica, social y ambiental. La consistencia de las disposiciones adoptadas con el objetivo de desarrollo sostenible es una consideración de primer orden dentro de la elaboración de la Convención Marco. Este fortalecimiento del sistema tributario, por medio de la adopción de enfoques de cooperación tributaria internacional para este fin, debe buscar, por un lado, aumentar los ingresos fiscales para poder financiar los gastos e inversiones requeridos para poder materializar los ODS de forma efectiva, un reto que enfrentan particularmente muchos países emergentes, sobre todo considerando el contexto actual de crecientes costos de financiación y presiones fiscales domésticas. Por otro lado, las iniciativas de cooperación que se adopten deben estar en sí mismas alineadas con el objetivo de desarrollo sostenible, particularmente buscando la sostenibilidad ambiental, la salud y el bienestar de la población y combatir la desigualdad por medio de asegurar una efectiva tributación de los individuos de alto patrimonio. Para Colombia es crucial que estos elementos se vean reflejados dentro de la Convención Marco. En línea con lo manifestado por el delegado de Nigeria, en el desarrollo de este trabajo consideramos relevante no pasar por alto las diferentes capacidades de las jurisdicciones, reconociendo las diversas condiciones económicas, tecnológicas y de desarrollo de cada una. En consecuencia, valoramos el uso de un lenguaje inclusivo que refleje la diversidad global y que reconozca las implicaciones de la globalización y la digitalización de la economía. Muchas gracias.
Thank you. Distinguished delegate of Saudi Arabia, followed by Zambia.
Thank you, Chair. We would like to echo the comment made by our distinguished guest from India and Nigeria on the language as presented. We think it is well established and appropriately framed for the inclusion in the Framework Convention. So we do support to keep it as is without the need for further elaborations. Thank you.
Thank you. Distinguished delegate of Zambia.
Okay. Thank you, Chair, for your leadership, and also thank you for the presentation this morning. It was very elaborate and I think was clarified a lot of things. I would like to echo that Zambia does support the statement delivered by Nigeria on behalf of the African group. And we do concur with Saudi Arabia and India's sentiments as well, that it does provide, the statement is broad enough, and it does recognize the different economic capacities and strength of states. And we do hope that this will definitely show that and prove that international tax cooperation is a reality and it will be possible and it's just not a theory. I thank you.
Distinguished delegate of Jamaica.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chair. Yes, we support the language that is there, given the fact that it's coming from the TOR. I'm just wondering, though, are we going on in the issue note, paragraph 18, it states that the committee is invited to discuss the issue of international tax cooperation approaches that contribute to sustainable development, etc. Are we going to be having that discussion during this session? Is it set for another day? And the reason I'm asking that is this. It has been said repeatedly that, and Nigeria just reiterated it and others, that the basis of the work that we are doing is ultimately to result in us mobilizing domestic resources, achieving the sustainable goals, and and to bring about our overall result that will redound to the benefit of particularly developing countries that are struggling with growth and development. And in terms of taxation, and I know there was a FFD4 meeting in Sevilla and so on, my sense is that there has never really been any clear guidance on how international tax cooperation is to, in a practical way, contribute to the SDGs. And if you look at what countries are doing, and maybe I'll use my own country as an example, the Revenue Department is focused on tax compliance and revenue collection, as it always is. There is a committee that is set up in another institution that is dealing with the Sustainable Development Goals. Both agencies, whereas they may have meetings and so on, there is no clear statement as to how tax is to contribute to that overall outcome. And so to cut a long story short, I'm just wondering whether or not we are going to have a more in-depth discussion on how these various tax cooperation approaches can contribute to sustainable development. I think that would enhance the work that we are doing, and I think that it would be a good outcome and good guidance coming out of this meeting as to how the two will relate. Thank you, Chair.
So okay, distinguished delegate of Cameroon.
Okay. Thank you, Chair. I'll start off by endorsing the African Group for its position on this particular aspect. However, I have a few observations that I would like to present. We'll start off by, we welcome the committee's focus on integrating sustainable development into the Framework Convention. However, We believe that it is essential to move from broad-based intentions to targeted commitments that reflect real development priorities, especially for developing countries. In our view, international tax cooperation must do more than align abstractly with the SDGs. It must be purposefully designed to strengthen domestic resource mobilization in ways that directly finance climate adaptation, health systems, and education, which to me are the key pillars to sustainable development in vulnerable countries like ours. We also have to incorporate environmental and social justice objectives in international tax rulemaking, such as addressing harmful tax practices that drain revenues from resource-rich but infrastructure-poor countries. We advocate that sustainable development provisions in the Convention include binding commitments to technology transfer and capacity building in tax administrations, fair treatment and global tax norms that does not penalize countries pursuing innovative or redistributive fiscal policies. In short, sustainable development must not remain a rhetoric pillar. It should be a structural priority embedded in the design, implementation, and review of all instruments under this convention. Thank you.
Thank you. So now we're moving to multi-stakeholder distinguished delegate of Tanzania.
Thank you, Chair. The United Republic of Tanzania aligns on the statement made by Nigeria on behalf of the African Group. Additionally, Mr. Chair, we fully support the recognition of the strong link between international tax cooperation and the achievement of the SDGs in their three dimensions, that is economic, social, and environmental, in a balanced and integrated manner. Mr. Chair, we stress that achieving the SDGs requires a fair allocation of taxing rights that enables all countries, regardless of their level of development, to adequately tax economic activities occurring within their jurisdictions, in whatever form they may take. In today's globalized and individualized economy, ensuring such fairness is essential to protect the tax base of our states, particularly developing countries. Mr. Chair, without sufficient predictable and fairly sourced revenues, our collective aspirations for sustainable development will remain out of reach. Therefore, Mr. Chair, we call support for fair allocation of taxing rights that will ensure additional revenues to finance for SDGs. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. So now we're moving to the multi-stakeholders. So the distinguished representative of International Labour Organization.
Thank you so much, Chair, distinguished delegates, dear colleagues. My comments are related to some of the discussion this morning on the role of the UN system, but also this afternoon on the role of taxation and sustainable development. I'll focus my comments today particularly on social protection. I think you all know that expanding social protection is essential for eradicating poverty, reducing inequalities, and formalizing employment and enterprises, thus facilitating a just transition to a green economy and promoting gender equality. This recognition was also in the Compromiso de Sevilla, the 2 percentage point on social protection as agreed language. But despite these efforts, today only 52.4% of the global population is covered by at least one social protection benefit, per the SDG indicator 1.3.1, with 35% of the population covered by contributory social protection mechanisms and 17.3% by non-contributory mechanisms largely financed by taxes. The stagnation of labor income share as well as high incidence of informality, the large share of own account workers in many countries, and the aging populations pose additional challenges. Hence, contributory systems will not be able to close the social protection financing gap alone. Therefore, there is urgent need to expand access to non-contributory benefits, such as universal pensions, child and family benefits, as well as public health services and/or complement the social security contributions of workers with limited contributory capacity with tax financing. Expanding access to non-contributory social protection finances by taxes not only reduces inequalities and strengthens the social contract, but also plays a key role in formalizing labor and enterprises. Building on ILO standards and on the FFD4 outcome document, we recommend that the Framework Convention include a dedicated paragraph which calls for the progressive extension of coverage and social protection systems, including floors to all, in line with the International Labour Organization conventions and recommendations, as well as intergovernmentally agreed standards and commitments. This paragraph should also clarify that the social protection coverage extension must be financed through the gradual mobilization of additional public resources, such as tax revenues and social security contributions generated by implementing the principles set out in the convention, for which the current discussions are ongoing. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Distinguished representative of Greenpeace.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I deliver this statement on behalf of Greenpeace and many civil society organizations working on the issues of tax and sustainable development present here. The truth is we cannot reach the sustainable development goals nor deliver meaningful climate action without fair and effective global tax rules. It was good to hear some parties make comments recognizing this yesterday, although we think that much more ambition is still needed. The global financing gap for climate and development is vast, over $300 billion US annually in climate loss and damages for low-income countries alone. So the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change process is stalling because of this. And countries across board are struggling to find additional resources that would allow them to meet the already agreed financial commitments to address the ongoing climate and ecological crisis. We would like to see a UN tax convention that sends a clear message. Those who pollute and profit from climate and nature destruction must contribute the most. This reflects not only a matter of fairness, but also public will. A recent poll across 13 countries, representing close to half of the world's population, show over 85% of people supporting higher taxes on the super-rich and polluting oil and gas corporations to help increase government spending on sustainable development and climate impacts. On commitments, we recommend the following. One, adopt a sub-commitment under the Sustainable Development Commitment around progressive environmental taxation in line with the polluter pays principle and the principle of common but differentiated responsibilities. This will ensure that those who pollute the most, especially the high net worth individuals and the fossil fuel companies, contribute their fair share, and that ordinary households are not unduly burdened with higher tax costs. The convention should include concrete mechanisms such as a surtax on the global profits on fossil fuel companies and other highly polluting sectors, as well as income on polluting assets, with revenues to be channeled towards global environmental and sustainable mechanisms under existing UN arrangements. Secondly, guaranteeing a fairer distribution of taxing rights so that countries where multinational corporations have real economic activities and value and where high net worth individuals generate, hold, and shift wealth can secure a just share of tax revenues. So we stand here ready to work together with you, Mr. Chair, and the member states to ensure that this convention delivers for all, especially for the billions of people whose dignity is undermined by tax abuses, climate injustice, environmental degradation, and deepening inequalities. I thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Distinguished representative of Public Service International.
Mr. Chairman, delegates, I feel very honored to take the floor here today. I feel honored because of everything that the United Nations stands for. I'm thinking about freedom, justice, and peace. I'm thinking about sustainable development goals, about fundamental rights and gender equality, about stability, prosperity, just to mention a few. And I quote from the Declaration of Human Rights: "Disregarding them has resulted in barbarous acts which have outraged the conscience of mankind. But for a state without fiscal capacity, these values will be empty words. Fulfilling these commitments depends upon the ability of the state to mobilize the necessary resources." Today we have a tax system that makes these values hard to uphold for many and almost impossible to uphold for some. Austerity within public services makes itself felt even within my home country, Sweden, where the members of my trade union see big cuts in education, healthcare, social work, and environmental protection. For some states in the global south, compounding the legacy of colonialism, this funding has been eroded for decades and more, making it almost impossible for these countries to provide the public services that are taken for granted in high-income countries. I would therefore like to add one word to this list of all the above-mentioned values, and that word is predictability. We heard it many times yesterday and today, but that was about predictability for companies and predictability for the return of assets and wealth. I must insist that the ultimate predictability is that for every human being, and of the sort that only the well-functioning and properly funded state can provide. Clean water to drink, a living wage, working hospitals, and a school for your kids. The protection of democratic liberties and a planet to live upon. We need, delegates, a convention that supports this predictability. So we need a convention that explicitly acknowledges the role of tax financing in sustainable development across its three pillars: economic, social, and environmental. Delegates, let's make the tax system predictable again. Thank you.
Thank you. Distinguished representative of major group for children and youth.
Thank you, Chair, for the floor. My name is Alexa Dominique, and I'm a member of the DeMont Foundation. I'm speaking on behalf of the FFD Children and Youth constituency, a major group for children and youth. Chair, sustainable development is a promise made to our generation, and tax justice is essential to fulfill it. If we want the convention to deliver long-term solutions, we must put Agenda 2030 and future generations at the core of the text. As a children and youth constituency, we highlight three main points on the commitment on sustainable development. First, the convention should explicitly recognize intergenerational equity as a foundational principle in its text, ensuring the International Tax Corporation safeguards the rights of future generations. Furthermore, it must be harnessed to drive the reduction of inequality and the promotion of human rights, gender justice, and social protection. Second, the convention text must be consistent with the multilateral environmental treaties. We call for the mobilization of domestic public resources generated from the outcomes of the convention to be used as a means of implementation for the Agenda 2030 and Agenda 2063 and the just transition. Third, in line with the civil commitment, and SDG 5 tax systems should be designed to eliminate discriminatory effects on young women and gender-diverse youth, including access to SRHR and other essential health commodities. This includes having language in the conventional gender-responsive tax and budget analysis frameworks and promoting equal access to benefits from tax funding services. Finally, the pillar of the sustainable development in the UN and the wider UN system processes follows the Agenda 21 modalities of the Rio Conference. Major groups and other stakeholders, including groups identified in the Agenda 21, must be enriched in the tax conventions as the modalities for stakeholder engagement. We also call upon the tax conventions to have strong synergies and report to the high-level political forum and the broader ECOSOC cycle. Chair, MGCY is pleased to continue its contributions to the committee. Children and Youth believes that these negotiations are directly linked to our future and will continue to advocate for a fair, inclusive, and forward-looking international tax system. Thank you.
Thank you. Distinguished representative of Montpellier Chartered Accountant Society.
Thank you, Chair. My comments is rather the technical part of it, especially given the words which are used in para 10C. It is recognized that linking sustainable development to tax laws is indeed difficult. When we look at this TOR, there are various aspects of sustainable development are narrated. What 10C does, it is selecting just 3 dimensions and saying that this is a commitment. So there are totally how many dimensions are there? Are we saying that the objective is dealing with maybe 8 dimensions or 10 dimensions? And out of that, we are committing only for 3 dimensions. Thank you.
Thank you. Distinguished representative of African Union.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And the African Union would like to align its submission to the previous interventions of the Africa Group, Zambia, Cameroon, and others. We are committed to global tax systems that not just only correct historical imbalances, but also actively contributes to sustainable development and in its all dimension. The UN Framework Convention on International Tax Cooperation provides a historical opportunity to build a new system rooted in equity, transparency, and sovereign right of every nation to raise revenue justly from economic activity within its border. We must seize this moment to create a convention that supports sustainable development in its 3 dimensions: economic, social, and environmental. For Africa, this means ensuring that the new Framework Convention addresses illicit financial flows and tax avoidance, which strip our continent of the resources needed to invest in health, education, and climate resilience. The lack of information on income or assets held abroad is a primary barrier for developing countries in tackling these issues. We urge this committee to develop a comprehensive package of these subjects to ensure a common and comprehensive approach. Furthermore, the fair allocation of taxing rights is paramount. We believe that every jurisdiction where business activity takes place, particularly in our increasingly digitalized economy, should share in the taxing rights over the income generated. This will support domestic resource mobilization, which is the bedrock of our sustainable development efforts. We call for the Convention to explicitly include an undertaking for state parties to establish fair, independent, and accessible dispute prevention and resolution mechanism. A predictable and just system provides the legal certainty needed for cross-border trade and investments, thereby improving domestic resource mobilization. As we move forward, let us remember that the credibility of this process hinged on the ability to create a system that works for all nations, not just for few. The African Union is determined to co-create a framework that is future-proof, and genuinely contribute to a more equitable and sustainable world. Thank you.
So I don't see any more requests for the floor from both sides, member states and the multi-stakeholders. So let us summarize what the outcome of this dialogue. That I think what we can get from this, that I heard some member states talking about some commitments or some initiatives that actually will be addressed under other commitments. While some other countries see that the current language as the TOR is very sufficient and is enough to allow for any future things to come under it. So we have 2 points of view. I think like when we are talking about high net worth individual, I think this is a separate commitment that will come separately under other commitment. Maybe other things like environmental things and gender and other stuff, this goes under sustainable development, which maybe there will be sort of future work on it, then it will cover. So this is the two sides or two conclusions that we get, that some commitments will go under sustainable development and some others already will be addressed under other parts of the convention. And with a point of view also that the text should be kept as it is, not to elaborate more in it, so not to lose its like holistic view that allow for any future things to go under it. So by this, I think we reach to the end of discussion on for the distinguished delegate of Kenya.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to add my voice to one of the points of view, because you've said there are some, I think different points of view that are arising from comments. And I just wanted to add my voice in support of the comments that were made by Nigeria on behalf of the Africa Group. I think when we started these conversations on commitments last year, I used to take the view that commitments need to be as specific as possible so that countries can know what is expected of them. But I think with time and in the context of a framework convention, I understood that the specifics can be taken care of in the protocols, can be addressed in the protocols, and that having a restrictive commitment then restricts the work that can come from that commitment. So I just wanted to support the language that has been proposed that is broad enough to be able to allow for future protocols and a lot of work to come from this commitment. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. So now I think by this we end our discussion for the second commitment, which is the sustainable development, and we now can have 10 minutes break. Then we come back again to go for the fair allocation of taxing rights, which I believe it will be a hot topic that will take long discussion. So I think so everyone deserves 10 minutes before we start in this hot topic. Thank you. We'll be back by 4:50. Okay, so now we are back, and we before move to the fair allocation of taxing rights, I just will call back again if there is anyone would like to highlight anything related to the sustainable development before we move forward. So now again, sustainable development, if there is any comments or anything which is remaining or came out from the break, from the discussions between member states. So the floor is opened before we move forward to the next commitment. So sustainable development again. Distinguished delegate of France, followed by Canada.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Et effectivement, je souhaitais venir aussi au soutien de la question posée par le Canada sur l'ajout qui a été fait dans l'engagement en début de phrase et j'aurais aimé, et c'est important pour que les États sachent très exactement à quoi ils s'engagent dans ce libellé, et il me semble très important qu'il puisse être fait une précision sur cet ajout qui dévie effectivement de ce qu'on a pu voir initialement. Pour ce qui est du développement durable, j'ai aussi entendu les interventions des uns et des autres sur la volonté de traduire en pratique ces objectifs. Et je me permets, Monsieur le Président, de vous soumettre quelques éléments de la France qui soutient pleinement l'avancement des travaux relatifs au développement durable, conformément aux objectifs définis dans le cadre des objectifs de développement durable. C'est la réalisation d'un équilibre délicat qui nécessite la mise en œuvre de politiques publiques adéquates et d'une coopération internationale renforcée. Et la première étape pour aligner ces politiques fiscales avec les principes du développement durable consiste à s'interroger sur la manière dont les systèmes fiscaux existants contribuent effectivement en pratique à ces objectifs. Et dans cette logique, la France souhaite souligner qu'elle a développé des instruments de budgétisation verte qui permettent d'évaluer l'impact environnemental du budget de l'État en identifiant les dépenses budgétaires et fiscales qui sont favorables ou qui sont défavorables à l'environnement. Et ces outils sont particulièrement utiles pour identifier les axes d'amélioration en termes de fiscalité. Il convient aussi d'ajouter que dans le cadre des négociations du mandat, la France a proposé l'identification d'une liste restreinte d'options qui sont très concrètes, et en particulier dans le domaine de la fiscalité environnementale pour soutenir et pour financer l'action climatique. La France réitère les propositions qu'elle a soumises dans sa contribution précédente, notamment en ce qui concerne la fiscalité du secteur du transport aérien. Et très concrètement, par l'imposition du kérosène utilisé dans l'aviation internationale ou via des prélèvements sur les billets d'avion. Et d'une autre façon, par l'introduction de mécanismes fiscaux pour le transport maritime. Ces deux secteurs demeurent largement non taxés, leur fiscalisation exigeant un haut niveau de coopération internationale afin d'éviter la création de zones franches fiscales dans ces domaines à forte dimension transfrontalière. Nous souhaitons aussi rappeler que ces sujets font actuellement l'objet d'un examen dans le cadre du groupe de travail sur les contributions de solidarité mondiale, en vue de favoriser les synergies avec les initiatives menées dans d'autres enceintes pertinentes. Ces réflexions s'inscrivent également dans le cadre des travaux du groupe de travail sur la fiscalité internationale pour le développement, le climat et la nature, établi pour accompagner la transition vers des économies sobres en carbone et favorables à la nature, et en particulier dans les pays vulnérables et en développement. Ce groupe de travail, je le rappelle, a été lancé lors de la 28e session de la conférence des parties, COP28, qui s'est tenue à Dubaï en novembre 2023, à l'initiative conjointe de la France et du Kenya, avec le soutien de l'Espagne, d'Antigua et Barbuda et de la Barbade. Cette initiative répond à l'urgence de mobiliser de nouvelles ressources financières prévisibles et suffisantes pour faire face au changement climatique et à ses conséquences, y compris en matière de pertes et de dommages. Il me semblait donc important de pouvoir rappeler ces initiatives concrètes que la France met actuellement en œuvre. Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you. Distinguished Delegate of Canada.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Je remercie l'honorable délégué de la France d'être venu sur la question que nous avons soulevée avant la pause relativement à l'ajout à l'addition qui a été faite au texte qui est proposé pour l'engagement sur le développement durable, ce qui me donne l'occasion de peut-être revenir sur le sujet et d'expliquer un petit peu plus en détail la nature de notre commentaire, du commentaire que j'ai fait avant la pause. Ce langage a été présenté dans le issue note comme étant un langage qui était commun aux discussions sur le développement durable. Et je reconnais que la plupart des gens dans la salle sont plus experts dans les questions de fiscalité que dans les questions de développement durable. C'est peut-être malheureusement, mais c'est notre cas à nous, pour la délégation canadienne. Alors, je dois avouer honnêtement qu'on se pose des questions sur l'interprétation qu'il faut donner au mot, au préambule qui a été ajouté à ce paragraphe, qui met l'emphase sur le besoin de tenir compte des capacités, des différentes capacités des États pour rencontrer cet engagement. On note que la même idée, le même objectif fait déjà partie, est déjà un des principes qui est énoncé au terme de référence. Alors, on est incertain à la raison, à l'intention qui est en arrière ici de l'ajout de ce préambule, et on est également incertain sur l'interprétation qu'il faut donner à ce préambule dans le contexte spécifique de cet engagement et comment on doit interpréter cette exigence vis-à-vis des trois dimensions qui sont mentionnées dans le texte qui est proposé ici. Alors, je serais très reconnaissant aux autres délégués dans la salle si ils peuvent partager leur point de vue sur la chose. Je remercie l'honorable délégué de la Colombie qui a déjà offert un élément de réponse, mais je crois, compte tenu que c'est du texte qui est proposé à titre d'un engagement possible dans la Convention, je pense que ça mériterait une discussion dans la salle pour s'assurer que les gens ont la même compréhension de l'interprétation qu'il faut donner à cette addition qui est faite au texte relativement au texte original qui était dans les termes de référence. Je vous remercie beaucoup.
Thank you. Distinguished Delegate of India.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you to the distinguished delegates of France and Canada to bring up this issue. But we look at this matter slightly differently. Eventually, the commitment that we have made with regard to sustainable development, its actual results will come from the other actions, the other protocols, whether it is in terms of the domestic resource mobilization that will come from the fair allocation of taxes, effective exchange of information, or the practices and measures that we take that will lead to the control of illicit financial flows. All this will provide domestic resource mobilization and will provide access to taxes that will help countries meet their sustainable development goal. So we don't feel that it is necessary to come up with another toolkit of taxation measures specifically under this commitment. This is a commitment that we are making, that we tie in the work that we are doing with respect to taxation as being related to sustainable development. That is the eventual goal. But the actual taxation measures will come from with the protocols or the other measures that we take. So I don't think that we need to come up with a separate set of taxation measures specifically under this head of sustainable development. Now, there has been this discussion about this phrase that has been added, which says taking into account different capacities. We understand that this is something that was not there in the terms of reference, but we also must appreciate that the entire discussion that we have had across in the ad hoc committee and thereafter is that our work must take into account the situation of countries who are at different places in the development spectrum. So I don't think it is something to be very concerned if this has been added to the commitment. In fact, I was having a look at the Addis Ababa Action 2030, Resolution 69313. At paragraphs 27 and more specifically in paragraph 28, there are references of taking into account different capacities of different countries in terms of developmental goals. So if we look at the entirety of the work that we have been doing in this context, I don't think there's a real problem with having this kind of phrase. So that is our thoughts on this matter. Thank you so much.
Thank you, distinguished delegate of Nigeria, followed by Saudi Arabia.
I thank you very much, Chair. And I also want to thank colleagues from France and Canada for the issues they have raised and providing opportunity for delegates to respond to those issues. Let me start by saying that Nigeria, we align with the comment from India. But in addition to that, I think it's important we put this issue of taxation and SDG into context. And the context actually starts from the Addis Ababa Declaration on domestic revenue mobilization. And we, of course, we also know the story behind that, which was the need to enable developing countries to actually use revenue generated from within their tax system in a sustainable way to finance development. Now, as to the specific connection, we believe that the Framework Convention is not the document and the place to begin to elaborate this discussion. But generally, we know that tax is directly related to issue of domestic revenue mobilization. And the ability of states to mobilize domestic revenue depends on a number of factors within the tax system, which includes issues of taxing rights, which includes the issue of ability to have access to timely information by way of exchange of tax information, which includes ability to appropriately and timely dispense with tax disputes. All of these are all banded together to affect the ability of a state to mobilize revenue within its domestic space. Now, on the issue of capacity, which again is a key factor within the inability of state to generate domestic revenue, we may want to find out why many developing countries are unable to generate adequate revenue within their domestic space. It has to do with a number of factors affecting their capacity and capabilities. Not just about technical understanding of tax rules or ability to implement them, but there are wider issues of capacity. Where the generally tax rules has constrained developing countries' ability to impose tax, that in itself is affecting the capacity of that state to be able to generate domestic revenue, or where the conditions for exchange of information is so encumbering that many developing countries are not able to immediately meet those conditions, then they are already inhibited from having access to timely information. Where also complexity in rules has such that requires extensive learning, extensive time for people to understand rules, then of course the capacity is constrained. And so when we look at the issue of capacity within this context, it is all encompassing. There are a lot of things, rules that are in the current systems that are already incapacitating developing countries. And I think those are the issues at stake and mentioned in a very broad way in the paragraph referred to by delegates from France and Canada. Now, what should we do? In my view, the language currently we have works perfectly. Now, elaborating and bringing this into specifics, we now have to do with the relevant protocol that may be developed as a consequence of of this framework. And so I think this explanation goes to address the issues raised by delegates from France and Canada. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you. Distinguished Delegate of Saudi Arabia.
Thank you, Chair. Maybe for the issue of capacity, if we look to the term of reference, specifically maybe paragraph 9, where it says, if I may read it, efforts to achieve the objectives of the Framework Convention therefore should be universal in approach and scope and should fully consider the different needs, priorities, and capacities of countries. So I think this is very well stated in the TOR, and I think it is very well clear, and what has been put in the language, or the amendment made in the language, is in line with the term of reference that we have agreed on. Now, when it comes to elaboration, I think we have made our position clear that the language as presented on the screen is sufficient and enough, and that we are not supposed to go and detail out what sustainable development is, and I don't think we do have the capacity nor the knowledge to do so. And there are other groups within the UN discussing other issues relevant to sustainable development. We are not here supposed to address all these issues, and I think we should respect the mandate of the other working group that are developing solutions for various issues that are relevant for sustainable development. Sustainable development here, as many have highlighted, it is a principle that we should keep in the back of our head when we develop the protocols and when we develop the conventions and the rest of the documents. And I think also going and detailing out what sustainable development is, I think we have a list of protocols in paragraph 16 and 17, which is broad enough to encompasses the issues that many of us here in the room might face or have as a priority. Therefore, we reiterate the position that what is what is proposed by the Secretariat is sufficient and achieve the purpose. Thank you.
So just for Saudi Arabia, the paragraph is proposed by the work stream, not the Secretariat. Okay. So getting back to Canada inquiry, I'm not sure if now it's the response from other member states satisfies this inquiry, and I think that Saudi Arabia mentioned that we have these capacities as part of the principles in the TOR, and now we get also from the FTD4, it's mentioned there as a part of the language in which to strengthen international tax cooperation and ensure that international tax rule responds to the diverse needs, priorities, and the capacities of all countries. So it's I think this language is taken from different sources, TOR and even other forums. So I'm not sure if this, but anyway, just I think to be clear about what we're discussing, we are discussing having this concept of capacity, because now we are not agreeing a text. We will come to the text later on. So that's why just making sure that Canada gets sort of some reflections on their inquiry. But anyway, the text, we are not finalizing text right now. Text will be agreed in a later stage in future sessions. So if we are satisfied till this point, I think we can move forward. If there is other points that need to be raised, please let me know. Distinguished Delegate of Canada.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just very briefly to intervene to thank the other distinguished delegates that have provided very useful information. And for now, we'll think more about it. Thank you.
Thank you. Distinguished representative of major group of children and youth.
Thank you, Chair, for the floor. My name is Muhereza Alan Muranja from Youth for Tax Justice Network that works with in over 8 countries in the African region. I am speaking on behalf of the major group for children and youth, and we would like to highlight the following priorities. Historically, multinational corporations and high net worth individuals have not paid their fair share of taxes, and this has been because current tax rules majorly allocate taxing rights to countries whose corporations or persons, or these persons who are usually high net worth individuals, are resident. And often, these are very few countries, and mainly in the global north. By having the allocation of taxing rights under the UN Framework Convention on Tax Cooperation, apologies for that. In the global north, okay. Secondly, countries further committed in the Seville commitment, where it was agreed that fiscal programming. Oh, sorry. No.
So, no worries. You come back. You can come back again, but we didn't start the discussion about fair allocation, so you can request the floor later on when we start discussing the fair allocation, which I think we will start now, because I think we are done now with the sustainable development, and now we are going to proceed to discussing the fair allocation rights, fair tax allocation rights. So before we proceed, I think, do we need Daniel again to brief us about it, so we refresh the minds of everyone? Looks like yes. So Daniel, please just take us back to the presentation and walk us through it, this section. Thank you.
All right, thank you. For fair allocation of taxing rights, we've already related it to one protocol, that's the protocol on services. And we see it as an anchor for that particular protocol. So the commitment basically looks at that, but then expands a bit more on some of these things. Next slide, please. In the discussions, one of the questions was how important this issue of fairness was to each of the states. And we have this one, it was important for supporting domestic revenue mobilization, and that currently taxing rights are being eroded by evolving business models. So there was the need to restore those taxing rights. The other one was to ensure that where business activity occurs, jurisdiction where business activity should have a share in the taxes that originate from those activities. The question which came out there was, what was the economic basis for allocating such rights? There were quite a number of different ideas on that. One of the things that came out was that the criteria should emphasize economic substance. It should emphasize value creation. And in doing so, we should also look at what impact this would have on trade, investment, efficiency, neutrality, and simplicity. The other thing that was important for members that the rules should be future-proof, that they should be adaptable in a way that as business models evolved, taxing rights or taxes would be allocated based on it. It was interesting because we tried to get into a definition of fairness, which seemed to elude everybody. It was a bit subjective. And so the idea was that as we go on, as we have that discussion amongst ourselves, we'll come out with, if not necessarily a definition, a description or an idea of what we mean by fairness. And that basically will be translated into the protocols. Next slide, please. So the outcome was that the work stream agreed that whatever the commitment we came out, it should, one, urge all parties to promote, and there should be an approach where all jurisdictions where business activity takes place share in the taxing rights of the related income. And in doing so, we need to have a balance in terms of economic efficiency, tax neutrality, simplicity, and the effects it has on cross-border trade and investment. So those were some of the things that came out there. Next slide, please. So that's what led to the questions that we have currently. That on the issues we've just discussed, or the issues we looked at in the previous slide, whether the elements of the commitment provide a useful outline for a commitment on the topic. So what we looked at, how does it provide the outline? How does it help to define or come out with a text on the commitment? Whether there are any additional concerns regarding fair allocation of taxing rights, that should be addressed in the article of that article of the Framework Convention. So generally, that's what we looked at, and these are the questions that came out of it, which we want to discuss as a group. Thank you.
Thank you, Daniel. So now the floor is opened for comments and interventions on the fair allocation of taxing rights. Distinguished delegate of Nigeria, followed by India.
Thank you, Chair, and thanks the co-lead for the presentation. I speak on behalf of the African Group, and Chair, permit me to start by saying that the global economy itself is rapidly changing. We have the way of doing business depending more and more on digitalization. We see dematerialization happening. We see more and more mobility of not just people, goods, and services, but mobility of profits. And all of these are happening at a pace at which extant tax rules are not able to match. Now, we, the African group, are of the view that if we have a framework convention that is not future-proof, that is not flexible, and that will not respect sovereign taxing rights of states, then we will have failed in our mission as a committee. And therefore, we believe that this convention and all the protocols that will come underneath it must be able to address existing imbalances in the taxing rights as regard residents and source jurisdictions. And this has nothing to do with whether it is global north or global south. It has to do with where economic activities are happening and the ability of such jurisdictions to bring the revenue or the profits or income to tax at the place where economic activities are happening. So to that extent, Chair, permit me to, on behalf of the African Group, make a couple of specific comments, and particularly as related to the questions that are asked as to whether the elements in the relevant paragraph provides a useful outline of commitment on fair allocation of taxing rights. We must first of all commend the chair and the co-leads and the team for the intent, because the intent is very clear, which is to provide a level playing ground for all states. However, the African Group, we are concerned that beginning to put detailed explanations, criterias, definitions within the body of the Framework Convention is not properly situated. In our view, the Convention should avoid detailing how or where business activity takes place or attempting to define key subtext such as fair allocation at this stage, because we believe doing so will divert our attention to begin to look, take ourselves away from the real issue, and then we may be chasing shadows. We think that having a general reference as we a reflective of what we have in terms of reference, saying parties commit to the fair allocation of taxing rights, including the equitable taxation of multinational enterprises, should suffice, because that's a very simple language, simple sentence that everyone can relate with, and therefore we should be careful that our formulation do not begin to go into micro issues. The second point, Chair, is if there are concerns regarding taxing right that should be addressed in the framework. Yes, there are, but with qualifications. If any specific element are referenced in this commitment, it is ensured that they be presented as indicative and not exhaustive. And I think that is also a major issue there. So we do not expect that the items or the issues will be exhaustive, because we cannot sit here in 2025 and see into what happens in 2030 or 2040 and be able to 100% sure and begin to list. So we should be careful to ensure that such items mentioning or listing them should be indicative. I think in final comment, Chair, we believe that whatever we are doing, we must look at fair allocation of taxing rights to include rebalancing taxing rights in the digital economy. We should also looking at the issue of value creation, and we believe this is very critical, particularly for source countries. And also, we should be able to have a statement that safeguards the right of source jurisdictions to tax economic activities based on their domestic rules. These are the elements that we hope we will find in the final text of the Framework Convention. Chair, thank you for indulging me. God bless.
Thank you. Distinguished Delegate of India.
Thank you, Chair. Our comments would be something in line with what has just been said by the distinguished delegate from Nigeria. In fact, as they say in English, that if you don't have time to write a short letter, you write a long letter. So we began the commitment with a very short statement that fair allocation of taxation rights, including equitable taxation of multinational enterprises. That was all. And now we have at paragraph 14 a very huge paragraph. I don't think that there is merit in trying to say too much, because as the distinguished delegate from Nigeria pointed out, that business models are evolving, and the issues that are at play here are very dynamic. So if we kind of try to over-explain ourselves or try to use language that is not general enough, then we may not be able to deal with situations that will arise in the future. So therefore, we should not try to, we believe that we should not try to tie down this commitment in too much explanation and too much of words and phrases. And over the past year and a half that we have been doing this work, there are certain phrases that we have agreed upon. We've agreed upon phrases like where economic activity occurs, value is created, or for where revenues are generated. So I think we should stick to language that we have more or less agreed upon. We understand the context, we understand the meaning. Now, if we try to use something new, like business activity, then I think we are opening another round of discussion, another round of trying to understand what this what it means. So, and then we have gone on to say over here, we've talked of economic efficiency, tax neutrality, simplicity, administrability. I mean, there are so many words each of which will have different meanings. And eventually all that second part of that paragraph actually belongs to the principles section. And here we are talking about commitments. So our commitment should be, the language that we use in our commitment should be crisp. It should be in terms of language that will serve us in the future, and phrases which we understand. If we just simply say that parties to the convention agree to a fair allocation of taxing rights, recognizing that every jurisdiction should share the taxing rights depending where economic activity occurs, value is created, and from where revenues are generated, I think that would suffice. And we need not have too much explanation, too many words, too many phrases, and then come to grief later. So that is something that that first comes to mind. And yes, as the distinguished delegate from Nigeria said, that it should be future-proof. In fact, that's what is written in paragraph 12. So I think that is something that we should keep in mind when we go on with this work. Thank you.
Thank you, distinguished delegate of Russian Federation.
Уважаемый господин председатель, уважаемые коллеги, спасибо за предоставленное слово. Помимо замечаний общего характера, которые были высказаны уважаемыми делегатами из Нигерии и Индии, мы, в свою очередь, хотели бы предложить ряд предложений сугубо практического свойства с точки зрения редакции некоторых пунктов. В разделе «Обязательства по справедливому распределению налоговых прав» позиционной бумаги предлагается высказаться по двум вопросам. В данном случае оба вопроса о полезности описания обязательства по справедливому распределению налоговых прав и о наличии дополнительных проблемных вопросов, которые следует отразить, находятся во взаимосвязи. Поэтому, полагаю, необходимым отметить, что, на наш взгляд, положение параграфа 14 не в достаточной степени раскрывает обязательства по данному вопросу и не в полной мере корреспондирует с положениями позиционной бумаги рабочей группы номер 2. В связи с чем описание данного обязательства требует разъяснений и уточнений в позиционной бумаге в части следующих вопросов. Параграф 14 содержит следующее предложение. Может возникнуть необходимость разъяснения принципов определения места осуществления предпринимательской деятельности ввиду цифровизации и других новых моделей ведения бизнеса. По нашему мнению, данное определение места осуществления предпринимательской деятельности является принципиальным и нуждается в детальной квалификации или даже внесении изменений, уточнений. Нам кажется, что данное выражение в том виде, в котором оно сейчас представлено, в большей степени приближает нас к существующей системе налогообложения, основанной на концепции постоянного представительства. Я не думаю, что это было нашей целью ни в рамках рабочей группы номер 1, ни в рамках рабочей группы номер 2. Кроме того, в описательной части вопросов о справедливом налогообложении услуг, которые поднимались различными участниками рабочей группы, не нашло отражения важного аспекта, который обозначался многими участниками как ключевого фактора, препятствующего справедливому распределению налоговых прав, и это ограничение прав на налогообложение услуг, установленные соглашениями о избежании двойного налогообложения. Многими делегатами отмечалось, что именно соглашения о избежании двойного налогообложения в том виде, в котором они сейчас действуют, создают значительные ограничения налоговых прав стран-источников доходов. В этой связи предлагаем дополнить параграф 12 позиционной бумаги положениями, отражающими данный проблемный вопрос. И последнее, но не менее важное, на наш взгляд. Полагаем, что в обязательство по справедливому распределению налоговых прав необходимо включить вопрос механизма реализации справедливого распределения налоговых прав, а именно порядок взимания налога с трансграничных услуг. Данный вопрос является актуальным в свете опциональной природы протоколов и необходимости создания конвенции как инструмента, способного реализовать практические задачи. Россия готова поддержать как концепцию закрепление механизма налогового источника с характеристиками, аналогичными налогу на услуги, удерживаемому у источника, предусмотренным статьей 12А модельной конвенции ООН. Большое спасибо.
Thank you. So I don't see any more requests from member states, so we go for multi-stakeholders. Distinguished representative of ICR ICT.
Honorable presidente y distinguidos delegados, una asignación justa de los derechos tributarios implica una reforma de los principios que rigen la tributación internacional, es decir, el principio de plena competencia y la preeminencia de la residencia sobre la tributación en la fuente en los tratados fiscales. Las reglas bajo las cuales actualmente se rige la tributación internacional son injustas, favorecen excesivamente la tributación en los países de residencia declarada del capital, tanto por la preeminencia en los convenios tributarios del principio de residencia como por el principio de plena competencia, que a menudo asocia arbitrariamente el valor a la ubicación de los activos, las funciones y los riesgos. Este sistema ha permitido a las empresas multinacionales erosionar la base imponible tanto en países desarrollados como en desarrollo, como ya fue mencionado, al transferir sus beneficios a sus filiales ubicadas en jurisdicciones con baja tributación. Dado que los países del sur global dependen más de los ingresos tributarios, el sistema resultante contribuye a la desigualdad entre el norte y el sur y limita los esfuerzos de los países del sur global por alcanzar un desarrollo sostenible. Las normas actuales también son injustas porque ponen a las empresas multinacionales en ventaja competitiva en comparación con las nacionales y recompensan a las empresas que recurren a una planificación fiscal agresiva. La falla fundamental del principio de plena competencia reside en su dependencia de una ficción, que las entidades relacionadas operan como partes independientes. Esto genera asignaciones de beneficios subjetivas y controvertidas que los tribunales tienen dificultades para resolver, dejando a las administraciones tributarias indefensas ante la erosión sistemática de las bases imponibles y el traslado de beneficios. Una verdadera reforma comenzaría por reconocer que la realidad económica consiste en que las empresas multinacionales son grupos de entidades unificados y altamente integrados, bajo un único control y con un único grupo de propietarios. Esto implica abandonar la tributación separada de las empresas multinacionales y el uso de normas de precios de transferencia para determinar la asignación de beneficios y en su lugar tratarlas a los fines tributarios como un único conjunto económico, como empresas unitarias. El principio de plena competencia permite a las empresas multinacionales, como ya he dicho, explotar lagunas legales y regulatorias, asignando ganancias rutinarias a jurisdicciones con altos impuestos y trasladando las ganancias excedentes en forma de pagos relacionados con intangibles a jurisdicciones de nula o baja tributación. El obsoleto principio de establecimiento permanente, referido al cual ya se ha hecho referencia, basado en un concepto de presencia física, también debería abandonarse y reemplazarse por el desarrollo de una regla de nexo basada en un principio de presencia económica significativa u otras soluciones que ya han sido discutidas, que permita determinar una presencia imponible en el país cuando una empresa no residente tenga una definida interacción intencionada y sostenida con la economía de ese país, incluidas las ventas de bienes y servicios por cualquier medio, incluido el digital. Por lo tanto, la Convención debería incluir un compromiso para garantizar una tributación equitativa de las empresas multinacionales, de modo que sus beneficios se asignen a todas las jurisdicciones donde se desarrolla la actividad económica real, y un compromiso de abandonar el actual sistema de precios de transferencia y adoptar una tributación unitaria basada en un reparto fraccionario. Muchísimas gracias.
Thank you, distinguished representative of Tax Justice Network.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, distinguished delegates. Taxation is always, at the national or international level, a pact. It requires cooperation either by citizens and their governments, or even, as we are discussing here, between countries. Yet countries and citizens are not indifferent to how the benefits and the burdens of cooperations are going to be distributed. Fairness here is super important because it is the basis of this pact. A fair allocation of taxing rights is crucial to establish the legitimacy of this instrument we are discussing. And we should recognize that the unfairness of current rules is, as raised by many others, one of the drivers of this process. To understand the meaning of fairness, we need to read the Convention as a whole, and particularly to understand the commitments in clear relationship to the principles and objectives which are already included in the TORs. In general, we consider that the principles and objectives provide an adequate guidance on how the concept of fairness should be understood, that is, to further sustainable development and to contribute to the fulfillment of social, economic, and cultural rights. To fulfill these objectives and to be aligned with these principles, it is also important to note that the limitations my colleague referred to tax treaties in relation to multinational enterprises in regards to taxation at source are also applicable in the case of personal income and wealth taxes. Many tax treaties limit the possibility of extending tax residency or applying exit taxes to individuals. in a world in which there is a growing tendency for some jurisdictions to offer tax residency for high net worth individuals with tax benefits in exchange for investment. In addition, the bias on residency is all the more problematic in a context where the wealth and income of the millionaires and billionaires are not only domestically sourced, but often have a cross-border nature. This is critical for the committee to consider, as the commitment speaks about the allocation of taxing rights, including but not limited to the taxation of multinationals. Therefore, while there is a specific commitment on the topic, we want to note that the fair allocation of taxing rights should also provide a basis for a coordinated approach to the taxation of high net worth individuals. Such coordination is important to address global tax regressivity and enable countries to raise revenues effectively and to effectively tax this group. The Compromiso de Sevilla established a fair commitment for member states to promote progressivity and efficiency across fiscal systems and to address inequality and increase revenue. The aim of reducing inequality within and between countries should be a key component of what fairness means. This is a critical consideration both for this commitment as well for the one addressing tax evasion and avoidance by high net worth individuals and ensuring their effective taxation in relevant member states. Moreover, we also call for to unpack some of these commitments so that they can be actionable through the ABC of tax transparency. The fair allocation of taxing rights goes hand in hand with the need to better access of data by authorities and also to have better mechanisms to exchange this information. This has clear implications for the taxation of multinational companies and high net worth individuals. We believe here that a global register of assets, as well as a common public database of country-by-country reports, is crucial to deliver this commitment. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, distinguished representative of ATAF.
Thank you, Chair, for giving ATAF the floor. We want to emphasize first by pointing out that fair allocation of taxing rights is like a thread that runs across every aspect of this work. But before we do that, we want to align completely with the statement given by Nigeria on behalf of the African group, and also identify with the statement issued by India in this respect. Fair allocation of taxing rights, Chair, is as important as you can get when you talk about this work. And we have spoken about how do we come to a language that we capture both present and future use of this particular commitment. So what's like broad principle-based flexibility has been thrown about. And fortunately, we go back to the terms of reference. The terms of reference have given us clear indication as to how best to frame this commitment. You go to paragraph 10 of terms of reference, it's very clear. I think just in line with the comment made by India that we should build on that paragraph 10 provisions in crafting our commitment language in the commitment section of the Framework Convention. When you go to Protocol 2, Protocol 1 on cross-border services, it becomes entirely a more detailed approach. Because in that context, we are now talking about how do parties relate to the substantive tax rule that will be developed as to whether they have fairly allocated taxing rights between them. So for some countries, development of new taxing nexus will solve the purposes of equitable allocation of taxing rights. For others, it may be ensuring that withholding taxes when they apply to services in market jurisdiction is not excessive. So you begin to see that these terms could assume different meaning to different people in respect of different work streams. And like a colleague who just spoke pointed out, it shouldn't just be tied to cross-border services alone. It can be in the context of rejigging or reviewing the tax treaty rules, as it were, if there is a future protocol to deal with that. It can also be in the context of taxation of multinational enterprises. There is no limit to where this particular commitment can apply. So to that extent, ATAF supports a language that is closely tied to the already agreed language in the terms of reference, and we believe that in the context of the Framework Convention, we do not need to be definitive or more elaborate than those languages as contained in the terms of reference. We thank you, Chair.
Thank you. The distinguished representative of Mumbai Chartered Accountants Society.
Thank you, Chair. My comment is on para 14 of the note. This is giving taxing rights to the jurisdiction where the business activities take place. Now, whether consumption is to be seen as a business activity for this purpose is not clear. A better approach could be to also refer to the place or the jurisdiction where the end consumer is located for the purpose of allocation of taxing rights. Thank you.
Thank you. Distinguished representative of Youth for Tax Justice Network.
Thank you, Chair, for the floor. My name is Arpin, and I'm speaking on behalf of the FFD Children and Youth constituency from the Major Group for Children and Youth. We apologize for the technical issues earlier as we're navigating various Google documents. As Children and Youth constituency, we want to highlight the following priorities. First, historically, multinational corporations and high net worth individuals have not paid their fair share of tax. This is because current international tax rules majorly allocate taxing rights to countries where these corporations or persons are resident, often in the few countries, mainly in the global north, that are responsible for creation of these rules. On the commitment on fair allocation of taxing rights, we call upon states to consider a minimum corporate tax rate that would allow for the fair taxation of multinational enterprises and ensure that invasive strategies like profit shifting can be properly restricted. Second, we call for the removal of the failed transfer pricing approach, which allows corporate entities to utilize differences in national tax systems to compromise critical domestic public resource utilization for Agenda 2030 and social safety nets. We urge that the committee consider multinational enterprises as a singular entity, basing their corporate taxes on global and not national income. Chair, tax policy is not neutral. It is a choice about whose future is being financed and whose future is being drained for private gain. We call on this committee to move beyond half measures and partial fixes and instead commit to a tax system that delivers justice across borders and across generations. I thank you.
Thank you. I think we are left with around 30 minutes in the time of this session, and then we need to close. So I will propose that we end the session at this point, because I think this topic still need a lot of discussions, and to start tomorrow morning with fresh minds to explore this topic better. So by this, the committee has concluded its work program for this afternoon, and we are going to convene again tomorrow at 10 a.m. in the same room. Have a nice evening, and looking forward to see you all tomorrow. The meeting adjourned.
So.